Rescuing people from addiction. Does it work? Do you want to be rescued? Does someone that you know want to be rescued, or would they rather do it on their own volition? Welcome to the channel. My name's Josh, living life alcohol free. If you're returning and a subscriber, thank you guys so much for being here. I want to start off by saying today is Sunday, and if you got through Halloween, congratulations. I want to give a shout out to Jason. You made it through that urge to drink as you walked by the ends of people's driveways on Halloween night, walking your child around the neighborhood, people having bonfires, people walking around with alcoholic beverages, people drinking, partying, having a good time, and some people passing them out, and you resisted the temptation. So congratulations to you, Jason. Living this alcohol-free life, it is something that is so eye-opening. Before I quit, I had no idea what I was getting into. And I think that that's what it's like for a lot of us. We don't know what the prospect of living an alcohol-free life can look like until we're actually in it and learning and starting to truly grow in our life, truly grow out of those bad habits and truly be our authentic selves. So this topic, it came up a long time ago when I was first in therapy. And it was probably, I would say it was probably around one year of being alcohol free completely when I went back and had a couple of visits with my therapist. And I remember talking to him about one of the people in my sobriety group struggling with their drinking. And it was somebody who I talked to frequently on there. And but I said, I don't want it to jeopardize my recovery. I don't want it to jeopardize and put me in a position where I'm thinking about alcohol or triggered in any way because I'm frustrated with them continuing to drink, but then come back and regret it. And he said one simple little phrase that stuck with me, and now I'm making a video about it. And I haven't touched on this yet, but it's going to be from a perspective of a drinker, as someone who's in addiction, and then a perspective of somebody who is on the outside trying to look in and help maybe their family member or their friend and don't necessarily have an addiction issue, but also want to help. So it can be from both aspects. I wrote some notes down. I'm going to kind of change the format up a little bit because typically I just go off the cuff and talk about my experiences, which I will talk about my experiences in this video. But I also want to touch on some of the things that I looked up, did a little bit more digging on, and touch base with those because I think it's important for us to recognize that, some of us do need a hand. Some of us do like that we have enablers in our life that help us, bail us out of situations or pay for us for certain situations um, or just help us out. But really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not helping us out. It's keeping us hooked on alcohol and giving us an excuse, and then also someone to kind of blame, because the onus should be on our addiction and our problems with alcohol and not somebody else's. But I want to touch on both aspects because there's a lot of people that uh, are maybe watching this video that have loved ones or friends or family that they want to help but aren't necessarily sure how to help. So that this video can help from both aspects. If you were a drinker or in addiction like me, you know that sometimes you wanted help, but then other times you just wanted to do it yourself. You wanted to figure things out for yourself. A doctor couldn't tell you, a spouse couldn't tell you, a friend couldn't tell you exactly, uh, you know, how to get out of this, how to have a better life. You had to you wanted to figure it out on your own. But in order to do that, we have to put the alcohol down and kind of work on that. But it takes work to get to that point. A lot of us struggle to really get over the urges to drink. And then we think about the commitment it's going to take. We think about how life might be boring if we're not drinking, and those kinds of thoughts and not having that crutch to lean on when we're struggling, all those things play a role in why we stay hooked on alcohol or stay in that pattern and that cycle of drinking. And I think it's important to kind of to notice some of these things as far as rescuing. We can rescue ourselves. Sometimes we need help, but then at other times it's not beneficial to rescue people if we're finally recovering. We don't want to jeopardize our recovery and our successes in sobriety or in being alcohol free for somebody else. We need to kind of step back. I made this channel as a way to help inspire people and help motivate them to see what alcohol free living can be like. I haven't touched on this subject yet, but there have been some things that have cropped up over this past year and a half that uh, I've had some people make comments and things like that that kind of make me wonder. They're lashing out at me and trying to kind of get through their point and frustrations. And sometimes I have to just say, look, I'm just here to share my story, kind of present you guys with some background on where I came from and how I was able to find success in sobriety. Not so much you know throw out like a rope and tug it back in for you. That is, I mean, I'm throwing out the life raft, but at the same time, we have to swim on our own to get to where we want to go. So I'm a lifeline. I'm kind of like an inspirational way. I have inspirational ways of sharing those things with you guys. But at the same time, we have to do the work. So I jotted down some notes, and I'll go from there. So the first thing is saving someone from a dangerous or distressing situation is the definition of rescue. So, what does that mean as far as helping people in recovery or trying to help people in their life uh, get out of addiction or help ourselves get out of addiction? So, you think to yourself, well, what's the harm in trying to help someone get out of a bad situation? Number one, it can create a codependent relationship that enables the addiction. So I'll share with you a couple of things. One being, there was a point in my recovery where I felt like I kind of had an eye opening experience where I thought for a long time, my mom was kind of enabling my behaviors. And I kind of felt like resentful at the same, excuse me, at the same time. I kind of worked through that process and thought, in the grand scheme of things, that was years and years ago. So it's really neither here nor there at this point. But there was also an epiphany kind of that I had about my wife, and she's been so supportive. I love her with all my heart and all my soul, and I'm so grateful for her that she was always there for me. There came a point when I thought, has she been enabling my behavior all these years? I would say for at least 5 years, maybe 8 years. I mean, it just really depended. My drinking wasn't that big of a deal when we first met in 2010, and we were engaged, and then we got married 3 years later. And then that's really when things started to get real for me, and my drinking kind of, I wouldn't say it accelerated, but it definitely became more of a crutch, I would say. I mean, I think I drank more frequently and I leaned on it more to cope with these feelings. And then when we had our child a year later, it became magnified even more. And so to get to the point, my wife kind of, she watched me, she watched my patterns, she watched my behaviors with drinking. Of course, I hid a lot of the alcohol that I was drinking. She wasn't there to watch me, drink one after another. A lot of times I was not in the same room as her, so I might open up that can of beer outside or in the garage so that my family and my wife couldn't hear me, or um, I might just, take the empties and put them out in the recycling and then take them back, and then no one ever sees how many cans are actually in there. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of us do that. We hide it. We hide our drinking. We hide how much we're drinking. So I don't know that my wife necessarily knew the severity or the degree of my what my drinking was, but when I would share it with her, there was two or three times between like 2015 and 2020 where I got to a point where I was like, I'm drinking way too much. I don't want to drink anymore, or I want to cut back. And then I would go a week without it, and then I would go right back to drinking. And I almost felt like, she didn't really think much of it. I think just alcohol is so widely accepted, and she's a drinker herself, so people get used to us drinking, so they just, they're just concerned about their life. They're not necessarily, judging you or coming down on you about your issues with it. Maybe we think that, we have a problem with it, but at the same time, we are the only ones that know the severity of the issue. So we're really ultimately the ones who are going to have to do something about it. But I thought, I got to a point in my recovery, maybe 6 months into it, and I told my wife, I said, it seems like you were kind of enabling my behaviors. And she was like, I can kind of see what you're saying. Like, she accepted. I mean, she didn't accept the amount that I was drinking. Not that she saw me drinking all that, but I would tell her exactly how much when I would have those deep conversations with her. And, she's like, I don't condone that amount. Definitely not. But at the same time, she let it be like up to my own volition. And I appreciate that for her. So I kind of let that go, because again, that's in the past. It's not worth, creating new resentments over. Like, maybe it was just a blessing that I had someone have someone and had someone in my life that was, letting me kind of figure this stuff out on my own. And even though I struggled with it, she wasn't going to be able to save me. Ultimately, I was the one that was going to have to make the move, quit drinking, join a sobriety group, get into therapy, and ultimately work on myself. And yeah, she can be supportive. Like I'm here for you guys, to support you guys, to kind of mentor you and coach you. But at the same time, you have to be the one to take those steps. I'm just offering guidance, and because a lot of us don't have that or did not have that, and so the next situation is, so that kind of creates, if you are trying to rescue someone, it's creating this codependency where, they're relying on you for their comfort, and you're relying on them for, for their, um uh for they're relying on you, and you're relying on them to be who they have always been, and so that kind of creates this codependent relationship. Number two, it can jeopardize the rescuer's sobriety, um, and it's hard to manage someone else's high stress. So if you're trying to help somebody get alcohol free, it can create this high stress situation for you, because you can't do anything about it, and they're already high in stress about this. So it's a detriment. Ultimately, it's a detriment to try, and bang your head on the wall over and over again when, this person isn't necessarily uh, able to, get to where they need to go without you. You're like their only lifeline. And I used to say that uh, through the first few times for those 5 years that I was trying to quit. my wife was really my only lifeline other than myself, and I was trying to do these things with willpower only, and that never works. And that was one of the things that I recognized, that I was doing the same thing over and over every time I was trying to quit. It wasn't working. So ultimately I knew that I had to surrender to the notion that I could do this on my own. I personally prayed and begged God to take me out of my addiction, and it was he answered those prayers with putting things in front of me that were ultimately the tools to get me out of it. So my reliance on my faith and my surrendering that I couldn't do this on my own anymore, my way wasn't working, that was ultimately what worked for me. And I think it can work for you too, but depending on it doesn't have to be God that does it for you. It can be, you can do this, but you do need a community. You need people that are like-minded. Like I say, my wife drinks, but she's not an addict, so she doesn't completely understand where I'm coming from. So when I found a book and found the group at the end of that book, This Naked Mind by Annie Grace, and joined that group and realized that there's hundreds and thousands of more people on this group and out there in the world that totally understand where I'm coming from. And it's not always just about the alcohol, it's about living life without alcohol. That is eye opening, to have people that totally get it, that understand what you're going through, and can offer that support and that guidance. Not rescue, but just offer that support and that guidance. So another detriment is, it can prevent the addict from facing the consequences necessary for their own recovery, such as paying bills, bailing someone out of jail, making excuses for them. All these things, we are trying to help people, but we're a lot of times we're also trying to figure things out for ourselves. So we don't necessarily know how to help somebody. So we might think that we're helping them, but at the same time, we're not allowing them to face whatever it is that they need to face in order to see for themselves that it's not that alcohol and drinking, this life isn't working anymore. And so from the drinker's perspective, we become used to that. In that relationship, we become reliant on that, and that's not healthy either. But that's just the way that it goes, and it's hard to break those patterns. So, which leads me into number four, which is creating boundaries. Uh, these issues, these boundary. I didn't learn how to um, form healthy boundaries for myself until I quit drinking and learned, and that didn't even come right away. It was a slow process. It was something I was aware of. There were people in my life that were causing me stress, and I didn't really realize it until I quit drinking, and maybe even like 6 months after I quit drinking, and ultimately was able to go off Zoloft and just live authentically. And I wasn't having those anger issues anymore, and I was very calm, instead of where I was with my drinking. And then the first few months after I quit drinking, which was up and down, high and low. And once I was on an even keel and I was around those people that I was kind of leery about, I started to notice this pattern, and I realized that I wasn't saying no enough. I wasn't doing what I was comfortable with enough. I wasn't able to convey how I felt very well. And all those things, they come in time, but once you're aware of it, it's the opposite of ignorance. Awareness is the opposite of ignorance. And ignorance doesn't mean that we're dumb. Ignorance just means that we don't know. And if we are like if we become aware of it, then we can kind of do something about it. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. as far as, oh, there was one other note. Number two, attachment of their to their successes and failures. So can jeopardize the rescuer's sobriety, managing someone else's high stress. Um, we can attach we can attach to their successes and failures. So attachment is a huge thing. Like um, if we attach our emotional state, if we attach our self confidence in someone else, we're never going to get very far. Uh, and that's kind of one of the things that recovery has been able to help me with personally. Those attachments. I became very attached to a lot of different things, and a lot of us get into drinking, and we have ruminations and we have these thought patterns, um, and then we start to like count on other people kind of uh, for our mental well being, and it can happen vice versa too to the person who's trying to rescue you. Rescue if they're trying to rescue us, they can, you know, be counting on us for, their well-being as well. Like if we're not okay, then they're not okay, and that's just not a healthy um, pattern to be in for anybody, for the addict or for the rescuer. So, and then number six, it removes the motivation for treatment, which if we're continuously, trying to help them out or bail them out, uh, it doesn't incentivize them to do it for themselves, to seek out the support and the true support that they need to get better. So it removes that motivation for treatment, and it's hard to see that. Um, so what else do we have here? I wanted to be rescued until I didn't. And these are my personal notes. I wanted to be rescued, not every day, but there were a lot of days where I was suffering, like hardcore, with hangovers, with anxiety, panic attacks. I suffered with panic attacks for about 10 years, from about the ages of 25 to about 35. I had these debilitating panic attacks. They were usually after the day after I drank a lot. And in my 20s and into my 30s, I wasn't necessarily an everyday drinker, but I was like an every other day drinker. And I would drink so much to the point where it was like I didn't want to drink that next day because I had a hangover. Then I had panic attacks. Then I was at the end of my day and I started to feel better. And then I got a good night's sleep. But then I would wake up thinking about alcohol again. And then I would either work, or if I wasn't at work, I would do something, and then I would start drinking in the afternoon, and I would start that whole pattern all over again. And then I would start to, there was a period of time where felt like I needed to call 911. There was a period of time where I felt like I needed to talk to somebody, like a friend or a family member, and and almost like I felt like I needed to be rescued, and luckily I had people in my life that were there to listen, but at the same time, uh, a lot of times they're, um, helping me out, and offering what knowledge they knew they could offer. I would say, I felt better, and then I didn't feel incentivized to get the treatment that I needed. Sometimes we just need to say that to somebody and say, and not in a mean way. Like my dad always used to say, like, you need help, and that always made the situation worse. He wasn't wrong, and I was always trying to get the help that I needed, I think it was just in the way that he was saying it, because I was coming at him with anxiety, and he couldn't emotionally support and help me with that, with his own emotional immaturity. So he had no other recourse but to say, "You just need help. You need to go get help." And I don't think that that's necessarily a great way to help and motivate people either. I think there's a way of saying it, and my wife always has a great way of saying it. Like, maybe you need to get into therapy, or maybe you need to take a medication, or maybe you need to, try this or try that, or, in a calm, rational manner. And that's way more beneficial than just trying to, tell somebody, uh, how to, that they need to get sober. You know, you're running, you're running your life into the ground, and you need to quit. And I'm not talking to you anymore until you show some better, behaviors, and shun them out of your life or push them away. I recently, maybe not recently, but like last year or a couple of years ago, when I was at church, they had a pastor filling in, and I was kind of rubbed the wrong way when he said there was somebody who was struggling with their drinking. They were making bad decisions in their marriage, and he said, and I told this guy one day, like, you need to quit drinking. You just quit. You need to quit. And he wouldn't quit. He just kept coming back and asking him, and eventually he just got so tired of it. He said, "You're done. I'm done talking to you about this. You need to quit drinking, and that's it. Period." And he said, like 4 months later, his wife called him out of the blue and said he quit drinking, and your words helped him quit drinking. And I kind of felt like he was fabricating that story, because I don't. My experience has been that doesn't really work for people. Um, like, the tough love approach isn't necessarily the best approach. It might seem like it in the moment, but for me, all it really does is create resentment. So that's never really worked for me. But um, here's another note I have. So it has to be on our own. It has to be our own idea to quit when we're ready, and that really is the biggest goal, the biggest key to getting alcohol free, whichever side you're on of it. Like, if you're being patient with someone that you care about, that is awesome. That's what they need. And even if it takes a couple months or a couple years or 10 years, if you're there and you're being supportive but not enabling, your relationship is going to flourish once that person finally is able to, you know, find their way. And that person's going to be grateful to you for the help that you for the support that you've offered, not bailing them out, not paying for everything, or not um, you know, doing all these things that don't, put the onus on the addict themselves, the responsibility, but just being supportive, and vice versa. You know, I didn't necessarily want someone telling me how to do it. I always felt like, a lot of people would suggest AA. Well, AA didn't work for me. A lot of people would suggest medication. I tried that 3 or 4 times over the years. I took it for a day or two, and then I was like, this isn't for me. I was worried that it was going to cause problems to mix alcohol and the medication. So I preferred to drink. So I stopped taking the medication after a couple days, and I didn't want to take it. Um, Eventually I knew in the back of my mind that one day I wouldn't be a drinker, because the level that I was drinking at wasn't sustainable. I was either going to die young, um, or just be miserable into my adulthood, into my older age, and bad relationships, and having just a bad, tough life, a rough life. I didn't want that. So I knew eventually I was gonna not drink. I just didn't know how it was gonna happen. But ultimately, you hear a lot of recovering addicts say, you can't be done until you want to be done. It's up to you. And that they're right. That's really the ultimate thing. And I think a lot of us know that, and a lot of us want that, and we want that for ourselves. And that's really what it takes. It takes our own volition. And that's one of the things that when I was talking to you about Jason earlier, and Jason, I'm glad that you shared that on Facebook because, um, you know, we we struggle sometimes with cravings or FOMO and watching people drinking, and we think, are we in the right making the right choice, or why can't I drink just one or two and not anymore? And why can't I, this and that, and make it feel like kind of like we're like, I don't know, not shaming ourselves, but just having those second guesses about ourselves. Um, but we need to go through that in order to see that. Look, we quit drinking. Most of us quit drinking not because we had to, but because we wanted to. We wanted a better life, and if we can focus on that, we're gonna go far, and we can focus on how good we feel every day instead of how bad we felt when we were drinking. Maybe we felt great for half an hour, a couple hours, whatever, but like the rest of the day, we didn't. We were trashed, and we smelled like booze, and we weren't present with the people that we cared about. We weren't present for ourselves, and then we wake up with a hangover, and it's just not a fun way to live. We weren't there. We were there in body, but we were not there in spirit, and that sucks. And that we have to keep that and remember that, and know that, yeah, maybe we aren't going to just have one or two or be regular drinkers. Maybe we aren't, and that's okay. That is what it is. There's a book called Alcohol Explained by William Porter that breaks down the addictive nature of alcohol and the reason why people become addicted to alcohol in the first place. It's a repetitive cycle, and the more we drink, the more we want to drink. It is what it is. It makes us crave more and more. We reach for the next one because we want to keep that feeling going. We have hangovers, and the alcohol is leaving our system, and once it's out of our system, we crave it again because we're having withdrawal symptoms. And once we get that drink again, we feel good. And that's just the way that it is. And so it's for me, it's either you're all in or you're all out. And that's the way it was when I was drinking, and now that's the way that it is now that I don't drink. I still don't ever say that I'm never going to drink again. Uh, I'm having a tough week with my dog. We had I haven't had tons of issues with like people that I care about in my family over these past 5 years that I've been alcohol free. I've had some issues. We've had issues with our home. I've had a lot of triggering issues. This week, my dog is not feeling well. I took him to the vet. We think it's degenerative disc disease. He's 9 years old. He's not that old, but he's getting to that age where he's a senior dog, and Uh, I don't know that he has much time left, to be honest. Maybe if we're lucky, maybe a year or two. But he's not turning a corner, and he's not able to eat and drink for the last couple days, 3 days. So I don't know where that's going to go. But it does make me think, like, how am I going to feel? How am I going to grieve? How am I going to process this? You know what I mean? But I know that I have all the tools that I need. I have all the people that I need. I have all the resources that I need, and I'll lean on that if I need to. But I know that I'll be upset. I know that I'll be angry. I know that I can be irritable. I know all that. And I trust that about me. I know it, and then I'll check back in and I'll let you guys know what's going on one way or the other. But like, I still don't say I'm not going to drink, but I know that it doesn't solve any issues. It doesn't solve any problems. It makes problems 1,000 times worse, and it just leaves you with a hangover. I don't want it. So next, we have to want sobriety for ourselves. Okay, got that. So how can we help people in our life that might need a hand? Uh, Number one, practice detachment with love. So we can care and love and support people. We can do all those things. We can encourage, we can motivate, we can inspire, we can do all of that, and we can love them. but we don't have to be attached to that idea that we have to have them in order to be happy for ourselves in our life. It's kind of a it's for me. I mean, and this is just my personal perspective on it, my personal feeling on this. Um, you might have different opinions. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this issue. But like, I always felt like maybe it would be heartless to ever get to a point where I felt that way, but it's not. Like it's self care. Like I'm taking care of myself and looking out for myself. And ultimately, we're the only ones that we can control ourselves. We can't control all the outside stimulus, other people, other, issues. So, kind of being able to pull away, but still love. That's that's important. Number two, don't engage in arguments. Don't give money. Don't accept abuse. Those are huge things. Um, Engaging in arguments is so stressful. And if you have kids, if you're in a relationship that's, there's a lot of arguing, those things can really trigger us, and make us really need to lean on something, substances, to and other things to cope. And so, the more you can kind of detach from arguments, kind of just if you see it spiraling, say, look, I need to step back, give it some time. Sometimes you can sometimes you don't even need to have that conversation, continue that conversation. Sometimes both of you say that was enough, and you're okay with that. Sometimes the situation does need to be hashed out, but you can come back with cooler heads, and cooler heads will prevail. Um, and definitely don't accept the abuse. Like, you know, uh, I was, I struggled with my drinking. Like I said, especially for the 5 years between 2015 and 2020, I was angry. I was irritable. My wife did not accept that behavior. She would tell me that when we would talk, not acceptable. But at the same time, I mean, it wasn't so bad yet that I felt like it was heading in that direction. And there were a couple instances where I scared myself, and I thought, if I say that or do that, I mean, that could jeopardize my whole entire life, my marriage, my family life, my home life, and I have to do something about it. And ultimately, quitting drinking was the first step to getting to that point. So, so that's huge. But yeah, we don't have to accept that abuse from people, verbal or physical. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, it's kind of like dealing with a child, in some aspects, not all, but like if you have kids, you understand they try to needle you, they try to press you on things, or they might lash out, and a lot of times you just have to say like, look, we're done for now. Either take a time out, cool off, go to your room. I mean, we don't need to say that to adults, but we need to do that for ourselves and say, I have to walk away for a moment, and then you walk away. But like having kids, it can be triggering, and so, um, but the more we understand and learn about that, we can get to the other side of that. Um, and again, set healthy boundaries, make them non-negotiable rules. Uh, Annie Grace on This Naked Mind used to talk about non-negotiables, uh, as far as drinking. Drinking is a non-negotiable. I'm not I'm not negotiating that. It's either, I'm in my plan. I'm not going to drink, and that's first and foremost. Um, Man, it's getting to be that time of year where I'm getting stuffy here the longer I talk. And I didn't intend on this video going this long, but I'll wrap it up here. A couple other suggestions how we can help people. Encourage professional help. Don't just tell someone you need help, and leave it at that. Just encourage professional help. Therapy helped me 100%, and I think it can help. It can help. It can help you. It can help a family member, a loved one, and then that shifts the burden away from you and onto the people equipped to handle it. Like I said, I got into this because of my history, the knowledge that I've gained being alcohol free, but I don't have all the answers. And a lot of times I can admit that if I need to seek professional help, I will. I haven't needed therapy in a couple years, 2 or 3 years, but the first 2.5 years uh, after my first 6 months of being alcohol free and I was done with therapy, I went back for a couple different tune ups, I guess. Around year one, I had like maybe 2 or 3 visits with my old therapist. And then around year two, I made it with a different therapist to get a different perspective because I was still struggling at home a little bit and still struggling with caring so much about what other people were thinking of me and just being anxious about that. I was able to kind of go back for a few weeks. I think it was a few months actually, not every week, like every couple weeks. I just talked that out. Um, there was a time when the therapist suggested uh, CBT, and she said it's a lot of work. It's really intensive. She didn't necessarily think that I needed it, but she was open to it if I wanted to try it. But I tried a couple techniques that she gave me, cognitive behavioral therapy, and it was kind of going back into my past, addressing some of the ruminations that I was having. And I was able to kind of nip that in the bud, and that really did help me. And it was because I got into therapy, and it was like, that I went through it for a couple months that I got to that point, and that really did help me. And ultimately, I was able to wrap that session up, and I haven't had any since, but it is helpful. And then support groups like Al-Anon, um, Nar-Anon, which is narcotics, and then Alateen, and that's for teens, and it's for like codependency and addiction, but it's also for the addict, and it's also for the person that's struggling with the, the addict in their life. So that's what I got for you guys. Let me know if you enjoyed that I had these notes. Like I said, I didn't intend on this video to go this long, but if you stuck with me, I'm so glad that you did. Uh, my channel is a work in progress, just like life, just like recovery, just like being alcohol free. It's a work in progress. We're all works in progress. If we're working on it, we're gaining on it. We're doing a great job. We're doing ourselves a service by focusing on it each day, whether that's in prayer, whether that's in exercise and meditation, whatever it is that helps you grow and look within, do a deep dive and introspection on your life and where you're at in your life and your recovery. That's what's most important. So I'm glad that you guys are here. If you took value in this video, please like and subscribe. If you're a subscriber, please consider becoming a member, giving us super thanks, anything to keep this channel going. Buy me a coffee. Those links are all in the comments below and in my bio. Um, and so I'm glad that you're here. Take solace in the fact that you're doing something about this. So have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.